oversimplify greatly. Also, to help those of you studying for tests, there are three main factors or agents that influence congressmen in making their decisions: their constituency, interest groups, and political parties. And they vary in importance depending on the situation that a congressman is in. Our basic understanding of democracy and representative government suggests that constituents would matter most for representatives and senators. Unfortunately, this is sometimes the case. Unfortunately, this is sometimes the case. If a congressperson ignores what the voters in his or her district want, they're probably not going to be in office for very long. Representatives pay the most attention to their constituents when they are actually voting in bills, because votes are a record that constituents can easily check, say, right before an election. If this is the case, then the relative lack of important congressional votes in recent years tells us something. Nowadays, congressmen are more likely to depend on direct service to constituents, what is sometimes called casework, to build up their record. This might be why congressmen tend to spend much more time in their home states and districts than in Washington. They might also want to check up on their lawn, If grass grows, mow it. Constituents' views can influence congressmen even without the threat of them seeing them in election, though, because congressmen can anticipate what the voters will want and respond to this. They manage this through public opinion polling. The more sophisticated polling is, the better representatives are at crafting their message, and maybe even their votes, to what their constituents want. We're going to devote a number of episodes to interest groups in the future, explaining what they are and where they come from. I know this because I'm psychic. But for now, it's important to recognize that they are incredibly important to congressmen, although not for the reasons you may think. Let's go to the thought bubble. Now, okay, when I mention interest groups, or say the phrase special interest, you probably imagine some guy in a suit, maybe even a fedora, surreptitiously handing a suitcase full of money to a congressman in return for his vote on some issue of supreme importance to the interest group that the suit guy represents. Or maybe you think that interest groups are more subtle than this, buying votes with campaign contributions. This stereotypical view presents a dramatic story and paints a picture that sticks to your head, but there's no empirical evidence that it's true. I hope the fedora part's true, though. That's probably true. The main thing that interest groups provide to congressmen is information that they can use in writing a bill or making a policy case to their constituents. One of the big things in American government is that information is very important and very valuable. On the other hand, interest groups do give an awful lot of money to campaigns. They also provide a lot of research and assistance in the writing of bills. Interest groups are most influential at the committee stage of legislation, rather than when congressmen are casting floor votes and their influence tends to be mostly negative. This means that rather than inserting items into legislation, it's much easier and more effective to exclude potential provisions from laws. Plus, this practice, maybe the fedoras a little bit, makes it easier to obfuscate special interests' influence on laws. It's harder to show that interest groups have kept something out of a law than that they put something into it. Thanks, Thought Bubble. That brings us to our third big influencer, political parties. Woo! Oh, not that kind of party. The way that political parties affect lawmakers is even more complex than the role of interest groups. A disciplined party leadership can put pressure on a congressman to vote a certain way. They call them whips for a reason. But this only works when the party is unified and strong. The weaker the party, the more freedom the representative has to go rogue on some issues and votes. If there are many different factions within a party, there's less of a consequence for not voting along the party line. This is why I don't have friends. Freedom. The clearest example of this is the so-called Hastert rule, named after former Speaker Denny Hastert, who would only bring a bill to the floor of the House for a vote if a majority of the majority party, in his case, Republicans, supported it. Side note, if you've got the majority and the party unity to pull off a stunt like that, you really end up looking like an effective speaker. Parties also help to organize log rolling, which is relatively straightforward quid pro quo bargaining. You vote for my farm bill, Senator, and I'll support your banking bill. You vote for my not punching Eagles bill, Eagle, and I won't punch you. Not voting for it? You've been log rolled. Is that how that word works? Log rolling occurs most obviously at the voting stage, but can also be part of the writing of legislation in committees. When we talk about parties, we talk about me. But when we talk about political parties, we can't leave out the president, who is the de facto leader of his party and its most influential member. I'm pretty sure you're aware of that. The president has the most power when his party and the majority party in Congress are the same. When this happens, Congress usually follows the president's lead and allows him to set the policy agenda. That way, they can take some credit if the policy is a winner and avoid some blame if it turns out not so great. We saw this most recently with the creation of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, which was written and passed during the first 2 years of the Obama presidency when his party, the Democrats, also had the majority of both houses. Divided government, when the president and the congressional majority are in opposite parties, works well for Congress too, because it makes it super easy to set a policy agenda. They just oppose whatever the president wants. This type of obstructionism is, unfortunately, pretty common in Congress today. Just look at the years from 2010 to 2012 when Congress's program could be summed up in 4 words. Repeal Obamacare and replace it. Wait, that's not true. That's 5 words. To sum up, political parties are most influential over Congress when a single party controls both houses and the presidency, and when the party leadership is strong enough to exert discipline and a degree of uniformity of policy. So that's about it for the factors that influence congressional decision-making. Really, Stan? That's it? That's all? I'm going on break. Well, obviously, there are other factors like the personal lives of individual congressmen and maybe congressional history, but since this is a broad survey of American government and politics, we can't easily get into that without taking less breaks. I'm going to go on break. For my money, it's the structures of Congress, and most of all, which party has a majority and thus controls the leadership and the committees that makes the most difference, even though I want to say and believe that constituents matter most, because I don't want to feed into the cynicism that seems to come so naturally in discussions of Congress. But I think we should try to avoid any cynicism and conspiracy theories when we try to figure out why a congressperson acted a certain way, and recognize that any congressional decision is the product of the complex interaction of a number of factors, only some of which will be apparent. Each of these decisions will be conditioned and constrained by the structures and procedures of Congress itself. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Crash Course Government and Politics is produced in association with
마일리지 할인은 나중에 받는다. 왜 기다려? 지금 받아. 체크하자. 악사 케어.
Citizens Safe, especially from foreign.
This episode of Crash Course is brought to you.
And today we're going to talk about the most powerful person in the U.S. No, not Chris Hemsworth, although he is powerful in a physical sense. We're talking about the president of the U.S., who right now is Barack Obama, but that's the last we'll mention him specifically. Instead, we'll examine the office of the presidency and what makes whoever holds the office so powerful. We're also going to talk about what makes him, and so far the president has always been a him, less powerful than you might think. You might have noticed a trend in these episodes that we like to start with what the Constitution says about the branches of government. That's not just because it's what appears on tests or what strict constructionist Justice Scalia would want us to do. We start with the Constitution because it gives us a formal description of the branch, in this case, the executive, upon which we can build. What do you mean, upon which we can build? That's nonsense. The Constitution is a limited document. It lays the framework and the rules, and that's all. All this extra stuff is an unconstitutional power grab. Oh, clone from the right. I was wondering what happened to you clones. That's a good point you make, but really, the world is more complicated than it was in 1787, and we need to have a more flexible government. The Constitution provides a framework for understanding it, but it needs to change with the times. Besides, if the president becomes more powerful than what's suggested in the Constitution, whose fault is that? Congress. That's who. Okay, clones, we get the picture. There's a debate about the role of the Constitution in setting up the government, and we're not going to solve it today. For now, we're going to start with the Constitution and what it says about the president. You win this round. Clone from the right. All right, let's try to keep those convos in the clone zone going forward. Thank you. Anyway, as with Congress, the Constitution lays out certain qualifications for the presidency. If you want to be president of the U.S., and I know you do, you must be 35 years old, which in the 1780s was actually pretty old. You were expected to have moved out of your parents' house by that point. And you must be a citizen of the U.S. who was born in the United States or one of its territories. The president is not elected directly by the American people. Yeah, your mind is blown. In the Constitution, as originally written, only members of the House of Representatives were directly elected by qualified citizens. The president is actually chosen by the Electoral College, which is complicated and frustrating for many Americans, and we're not going to go into it now, except to say that the reason it exists is that the framers didn't trust the popular vote all that much. So they built in the Electoral College as a safeguard against the people electing scary demagogues, or the person they wanted elected. Some people say that this is not particularly democratic, mostly because it's not particularly democratic. So democratically elected or not, the president is pretty powerful, but he has different categories of powers. What are they? First, he has military powers to send soldiers and planes and ships to do military things. He also has judicial powers in that he appoints federal judges and Supreme Court judges, subject to Senate approval, of course. He is the nation's chief diplomat, which is the source of his foreign policy power. The president can also propose laws, although he has to get a congressman or senator to actually introduce them into Congress. This is a legislative power. And since he's the chief executive, he also has executive power, which means that he's supposed to ensure that the laws are carried out. This is his most far-reaching power, probably because it's the least well-defined. Executive power is a pretty big deal, so we're going to give that its own episode. Another way to describe the president's powers is as either formal or informal. Formal powers are the ones we can find in the Constitution itself. Main powers are Congress or the president himself.
Okay, so I see Sophie is here, and we're recording. Okay, so I also would like to stop the feedback. Okay, so I think that's basically stopped. It's, of course, I haven't used Zoom in some months since fall of last year. So it's changed a bit since I opened up Zoom to set this class up. And I don't want to do anything to accidentally shut down the class. But Sophie is here, so we do have our presenter today, which is great. And but so before I forget, by the and again, repeat, we are recording here, so I will post the link to the recording on the Cyber Campus, so anybody who missed the class can find it if they want to. I think we should do the attendance before I forget. So let me go to the cyber campus. And again, let me share the screen and like this and go like that. And yes, there it is, cyber campus. And so your smart attendance number is, let's see here, smart attendance number is 160. 160 is your smart attendance number. So please enter in that number. And let me see here. So your smart attendance number is 160. I remember doing this during the pandemic. Of course, it was nice to always put this figure in there just so that people could find it on the chat. And there you go. Okay. And so there you see that that's all posted. So we don't want to spend too much time me talking because in the debate we'll do that, and then I want you to have the chance to ask questions. If any time is left, then we can break up into groups and give you each a chance to comment on the basis of your paragraph. So I suggest we go directly to the debate. And just to remind you as to what the debate topic is, so let me open up the lesson plan for this class and see here. And of course, I always have to remember to make sure you can see what I see. And so I go back to share screen and the lesson plan. I think this is the lesson. Oh, this is the lesson plan here. And you can see here is the lesson plan. So to CUK students, the U.S. Congress will ensure that the U.S. remains an ally with South Korea under a Trump administration. So, of course, the same rules apply. I am pro, and Sophia is con, and so I will do the time here with my smartphone and set up my presentation for 6 minutes, and then Sophie will speak. And of course, if Sophie has something to show in terms of the I'm trying to set up my clock here, my timer here. If Sophie wants to set up the it's not cooperating, this thing, my phone anyway. Well, let me just use the my watch here, since my phone is acting in a strange way. Let's just go ahead and start here, and I will speak for 6 minutes maximum, and then Sophie will then speak for 6 minutes maximum. If Sophie has something that she wants to show on her screen, I can allow her to share screen if she wants to. And so Sophie, do you have anything that you want to share? Do you want to use the computer in some way to show a PowerPoint or something like that?
No, I'm fine. I don't have anything to show.
Okay. Well then, I am just so irritated about why my computer is not doing it the way what I want it to. My cell phone is not doing what I want it to do. I mean, I don't have time to worry about it now because time's wasting. So let me then just go ahead and use the timer on the computer. Okay, so I will make my opening statement as to why to CUK students, the U.S. Congress will ensure the U.S. remains an ally with South Korea under the Trump administration. And let me see, alarm here. Timer, let me see, timer. Go. Okay. Open up. Yeah, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we saw, of course, in the presentations that I was showing you at the start of the class, that the U.S. president power depends a lot upon his relationship to the U.S. Congress. At the end of the presidential power video I was showing you on Crash Course U.S. Government and Politics, the point was made that the U.S. Constitution, emphasizing very much the checks and balances notion in its constitutional setup, makes it much more feasible for a U.S. president to implement his program or agenda if he controls both houses of Congress. And if he doesn't control both houses of Congress, then his power and influence becomes significantly, even perhaps radically degraded. As we imagine what will happen if Donald Trump gets elected in the United States again this November, we saw what happened after when he was president in 2016. His party did control the Congress as well as the presidency, and well, even then, because Donald Trump was Donald Trump, he was so disorganized, he didn't really pass much of any legislation, any significant legislation, because his government wasn't prepared. His administration wasn't prepared to implement that legislation. And only piece of legislation he did get passed was a tax cut. That was his only major piece of legislation, which, of course, made a lot of people very happy, including particularly the rich and powerful members of the U.S. economy and their congressional allies and supporters, to whom they give campaign contributions to help them win elections. But then, when it became clear that Donald Trump was a disruptive force, he lost control of the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018 because he was so disruptive and so frightening to a lot of people that his party lost control of one of the houses of Congress. Now, that happened in 2018. Even before the midterm congressional elections in 2018, he attempted to do other legislation besides the tax cut. Like, for example, he tried to repeal the medical insurance system that was established under President Barack Obama, called Obamacare. And the U.S. Congress is still set up in a way that even if a president controls both houses of the Congress through the party that he leads, even at that time when Donald Trump was the Republican president and the Republicans had a majority in both the House and the Senate and the Congress, still the U.S. Senate has a rule in place that legislation basically requires 60 out of 100 votes. 60 senators have to vote to approve legislation for the legislation to be adopted. So his Republican Party had a majority of the Senate votes. A majority of the senators were Republicans, but they didn't have 60. And consequently, he was not able to get all 60. He wasn't able to get the Obamacare passed through the Senate because he couldn't get the 60 votes necessary to approve that passage through the Senate. So that break on the president's power is also there. Not only does he have to have a majority, his party have to majority control of the Senate, they also have to, they also have to control a lot of senators' votes, which means basically at least 60 of the 100 in order to be able to pass legislation. And that's not typical. That's not common. Then in 2018, not only did they not have control of 60 senator votes, they lost control of the majority of the House of Representatives. And then it came out in 2019, in the summer of 2019, that Donald Trump attempted to pressure the Ukrainian government that just elected this president, Volodymyr Zelensky, to announce that they were launching an investigation into Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, and possibly Joe Biden as the vice president under Barack Obama, that somehow they were engaged in corrupt use of American government influence to benefit Hunter Biden and the Biden family. And there was no evidence of this, but Trump tried to pressure the government in Ukraine to make a big announcement that they were doing an investigation. And the idea was to smear or spread suspicion and disrepute regarding about Hunter Biden and the Biden family and Joe Biden, because Donald Trump knew that Joe Biden was going to be his main opponent in 2020, that Joe Biden was the main threat to Donald Trump. And he was right, of course. And this led to an impeachment by the House of Representatives voting to put Donald Trump on trial in the Senate. So to vote to impeach means to vote to put on trial, and that means passing articles of impeachment then directs the Senate to begin having a trial. And of course, the Senate didn't vote by 67 because it requires 2/3 majority vote. It didn't vote by 67 votes to convict Donald Trump. I think it was, basically close to 50-50, but nowhere near 67 votes. But the point is that this process went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, clearly illustrated that Donald Trump was under political attack. And for Donald Trump to do something even more radical, and in the midst of that impeachment trial, became more and more unlikely. So if Donald Trump were to get back into office, and if he does not control both houses of Congress by large majorities, it's really difficult to see how he would avoid coming under threat of the Congress investigating his administration in a way which, remember, all of these politicians in Washington are always focused on the next election. They're always focused on shaping public opinion. And as I said in the previous class, that majority of 90 to 95% of Congress people get reelected, but there's always a few that are on the edge, that are on the borderline of losing or winning. And if there's, for example, if a war starts in Korea because of Donald Trump's stupidity, right, there's going to be a hostile reaction against the United States, against his administration, because there's just 100,000 Americans just living in Seoul, 100,000 Americans just living in Seoul, teaching English, people like me, right? There's this big American presence here that's going to be a big source of political damage to a Trump administration through the Congress, because the Congress will respond to this anger on Americans, that somehow Americans are in a conflict or suffering or being killed or the economy's being damaged by a war in Korea. In other words, that there will be a lot of negative reaction to a Donald Trump administration if there's radical disruption of U.S. policy in Korea. So that's where I'll stop now, and I'll let Sophia make her opening statement.
Okay. As we all know, South Korea and America share a history of being allies that dates back to the Korean War in the 1950s. Back then, the USA fought on the side of South Korea. Both sides signed a treaty that can, in the case of an attack from a third state, bound them together to support each other in war. Additionally, there's always US military stationed in South Korea. And even former President Obama called South Korea one of the American closest allies and greatest friends back in 2009. So it's safe to say that the USA and South Korea have a stable history with each other. And even Joe Biden made plans with the current president of South Korea to expand the joint military training, not that far back in the year of 2022. So at first glance, it's easy to see that South Korea and America have a great relationship, right? So why would we assume that under the Trump administration, this course could drastically change? Compared to other presidents, Trump always had a different view on the South Korean American ally. So the question is now, would the Congress stop Trump from potentially ending the alliance between America and South Korea, or do they even want to do so? As we know, the Congress in America holds the most important power when it comes to lawmaking. They can make new laws, raise and spend revenues. No proposed laws or bill can go into effect without the consent of the Senate and the House of Representatives. They have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foreign powers. At some point, it was very clear which house had to work with which laws, but these days it gets more and more mixed up. Ultimately, each house must approve all bills. Congress also has the power of impeachment, which always does take a long time to go through. So even if the House decides that Trump is unfit for the position of president, at some point, because of his decision making, it would take a long time to go through. Impeachment can happen for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, or even significant abuse of power. But since it's something that rarely happens, there are only a few hard and fast rules into existence. So far, only 7 people were ever convinced and removed from office. So even if Congress decides that Trump's actions are reason enough to remove him from office, it would take a majority of votes from Congress, so at least over 67 members. They need to vote for that. And then it would take, as I already stated, a very long time to go through with it. And before we even go that far, we need to take into consideration that the members of the Congress are mostly influenced by political parties. So it might be even harder to get a majority of votes. Even the president himself might also try to influence the members of the Congress, either to get him to vote for his legislative ideas or even to not impeach him. That is something that happens mostly when the presidency and the Congress are led by people from the same party, which most likely can happen. And in this day and age, what we also have to take into consideration is that the presidents play a bigger role in the legislative agenda, especially when the House and Senate are divided. And without a majority, it's hard to find a consensus. Yes, that was my statement.
Okay. Once again, if anybody has questions, they can ask a question. They can raise their hand in Zoom, or they could send a question to the chat function and to get an extra credit point. So if you have a question, you can please raise your hand, or you can send a message to the chat function, or just speak up. Just say something if you want to ask a question. So maybe you want to hear Khan speak one more time before you ask such a question. But Khan will speak once more. If not, then I will go ahead and make my my own presentation. Let me go back to the share screen and again to show you the debate topic. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this is an important question, and this is, let me set my timer. Let's see now, since I hopefully fixed my phone, to make it work this time. But so I'll set it for 4 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, John Mearsheimer is a famous political scientist who's got millions and millions of views on YouTube. And, he's been asked about this question as well. He thinks that if Trump were to get elected and back into office, which, is questionable, but if he were, John Mearsheimer thinks that this vast national security establishment that involves millions of people, right? When you think of all the people that work for the U.S. government, and particularly the U.S. Defense Department, right? And you think of the people that work in all the other departments of the U.S. government that have an international focus. And all of the departments and agencies of the U.S. government have some international focus, whether they be in the Department of Agriculture or the Department of the Treasury or the Department of Education. They all have some international focus, right? Because of globalization, because of the global economy. For example, the Agriculture Department. The Agriculture Department is going to be very interested in international affairs because the U.S. exports so much agricultural products, right? And then we talk about the Defense Department, right? Which, aside from the people that work for the Defense Department, directly for the Defense Department, there's the millions of people that work in the companies and organizations and corporations that supply the Defense Department, that work for the Defense Department, that are hired by the Defense Department, right, to supply the guns, the ammunition, the tanks, to build the ships, to build the weapons that the U.S. government buys from them to use for the military, or the services they provide. I mean, there's so many think tanks and analysis institutions that are hired by the U.S. government, and not just the Defense Department, also the intelligence agencies, right? I mean, I knew people in Washington that worked for Booz Allen and other professional services organizations that are hired by the by the intelligence agencies to do analysis of open source media sources. The point is that there are millions of people that have a vested interest in the United States being actively engaged in global affairs, right? And, like we talk about in this class, people tend to see a reality in a way that is self-serving. And so if you're somebody who works in the US government that's got this global orientation, you're going to favor somebody that's going to support continuing to have that global orientation because your position, your career, your job depends upon it, right? And so, and these people, they tend to be more educated, they tend to have college degrees, and they tend to pay attention to politics, and they tend to vote and participate in political elections, right? They vote, they also donate money and political resources to candidates for Congress, candidates for the presidency. All of these people are going to be motivated to oppose somebody like Trump the way they did mobilize against Trump when Trump was challenging or undermining U.S. Leadership positions around the world. And they'll do it again. They will do it again, and they will work through the Congress, particularly, people that have an economic vested interest, including the companies that supply the U.S. Defense Department. They're going to resist Trump. When Trump was president, the Defense Department budget didn't decrease, but it increased. The first year that Trump was president, the Defense Department budget increased 10%. It went up 10%. It didn't go down when Trump was elected, right? It continued to go up and up and up and up and up in size. So where was this withdrawal from U.S.? What Trump opposed, what Trump didn't want was to work and cooperate with allies. It was America first. He wanted America to do whatever the Americans wanted to do. But the United States didn't withdraw, right? They instead wanted to focus more on China, get the Europeans to spend more to take care of Russia because that's their problem, but we got to focus more on China. But I didn't see any evidence that the U.S. wanted to withdraw from the world, that the U.S. was somehow going to withdraw from the Middle East to leave Israel on its own. None of that happened in the Trump administration. I don't think it's going to happen in the next Trump administration. So, anybody have any questions? If not, then we will go to Sophia to make her rebuttal and conclusion. So Sophia will now speak for up to 7 minutes. So you can start, Sophia.
It's America first. That is true when Trump was in office the first time. And he will continue this path, probably the second term he is into office. At least that's what his campaign already let us know. And when we're already talking about the military costs, we need to talk about the issue that might occur if Trump gets reelected. And that is about covering the costs for the US military stationed in South Korea. Because in its first term, he made it very clear that he wanted to split up the cost or give more of the cost back to South Korea. Or even withdraw the US military from South Korea if they cannot pay for it, which ultimately would worsen the relationship between America and South Korea. Back then he demanded an outstanding sum and basically tarnished the friendship between the two countries already. And in the Biden administration, they hate to work very fast on rebuilding the friendship between the two countries. But it's still safe to assume that Trump would try to undo all of the work, especially after it was released that Trump actually got to know Kim Jong-un, the leader from North Korea, and realized that he especially feel threatened by the US military presence in South Korea. Which was also posted on the New York Times. And even then, Trump already assailed the mutual defense treaty with Japan at some point. So it's safe to assume that he would also do similar things to South Korea and other countries. Yeah, that's my second statement.
Okay, anybody have an extra credit question they want to ask Sophia or me? Anybody want to ask and get an extra credit point by asking an extra credit question? Going once, going twice, and I'm interested. I can't see where you can raise hands here, reactions. Oh, there, that's where you raise hands. So, you can raise your hand like this, right? If you want to ask a question, right? That's another way to ask a question. So it's up to you. Okay, so I have the last word. So let me go back to sharing the screen here and as pro and let me restart the clock here and okay, ladies and gentlemen, but again, what we saw in the Trump administration was theater, right? It was all theater. The US didn't withdraw its forces from South Korea. It argued and publicly fought with South Korea by demanding that South Korea pay, $5 billion a year instead of $1 billion a year to the US to cover the costs of the American military deployment in South Korea. The South Koreans broke off negotiations, and everything stopped. Like nothing happened as a consequence of that drama, of that theater, of that public display. Now, of course, there were other issues that soon emerged. We already mentioned how there was the first impeachment of Trump that went into 2019, late 2019, and early 2020, and then the pandemic exploded into the world, and then Trump was his chaos of his administration came out. Now, if Sophie is arguing that this time Trump will be different because Trump will be prepared, I think it's not only the supporters of Trump that want to disengage from South Korea and Japan, and I'm not even certain that they really would. I mean, but his opponents will be prepared, right? I mean, this vast national security establishment, which is sometimes mocked as the blob, right? The blob. This is it's like an iceberg, right? You can see some of its representatives speaking above in high profile public statements, but this vast, large body and source of its influence is typically hidden because it's bureaucrats, it's people in companies, it's people that they will respond if their positions or their jobs they think are threatened, right? And so will the Americans if Trump destabilizes. Can you imagine, for example, if there's a war in Korea, it would cause major damage to the American economy. It would cause major damage to the economy in major effects, right? If China were to invade Taiwan, it would cause major damage to the global economy. And how do Americans respond if the economy goes badly? They will blame the president, that somehow the president was responsible for this war. The president is to blame for why Americans are fighting somewhere. The president is to blame for an economic recession. In terms of millions of people responding at an emotional level to the fact that their lives have been affected in ways that they don't like, and that's typically their economic lives. And that's the main danger from a Trump presidency. It's not that Trump would succeed in bring out a major change in U.S. foreign policy. The danger of the Trump administration would be that he would generate such uncertainty and lack of clarity that there would be some mistake made, right? That Xi Jinping and the Chinese government would think that they could take Taiwan and Trump wouldn't do anything about it because Trump has said different things, or that Russia would invade Moldova or some other because Trump wouldn't respond, right? That the Trump administration is not sending clear signals about the American commitment to that. And the point is that Trump would lead to more mistakes being made by Putin, by Moscow, by Xi Jinping in Beijing. And that's the major, it's just hard for me to imagine how any president would be able to get away with pulling the United States out of NATO, for example, or pulling even the Americans out of Japan and South Korea. Right? I mean, there would be such howls of reaction and response that it would again be chaos. Chaos would again set in. And we would have a repeat of what we saw in the Trump administration of 2016 to 2020. So that's my conclusion. Again, if anybody has a question, they can ask. If not, okay, well, let me go back to the screen share for the class vote here. And you can see that in the please vote on how you evaluate the opening statement. That's me, pro, and the opening statement for con opening statement, right, as well, anonymously, and then pro rebuttal. That was me, and a con rebuttal as well. I should say, where's con rebuttal here? Con rebuttal. Where's con rebuttal? And conclusion here, right? And then pro conclusion, which I just gave you, and again the use of the week's reading material, pro use of week's reading material, and cons use of week's reading material, if I can find cons use of week's reading material, and of course our beautiful presentation style, my presentation style, Sophia's presentation style, and there you seek for con. All right, and most importantly, vote on who won the debate, right? And also grade the debate, and so you can see where it says grade the debate. Here we go, grade the debate. Okay, so at the time remaining, you all wrote your paragraphs and you all got my feedback. So let me then set up another vote on the topic. Just a second here. I've got to get the debate topic and ask you to vote on, let's see here, vote, add, and like this, and see if I can remember how to do this, because it's been a while since I've actually done a lot with Zoom. And so debate topic, and this time make it post result, make it clear, pro and con, and neutral cannot decide. So please, everybody vote on, based upon your paragraphs that you submitted, if you're pro or con on this topic. And so let me see, make this, edit this, and set the timer for 10 o'clock here. And since I forgot to do that here. So here you go. So please vote. Everybody please vote on pro or con on the debate topic based upon your paragraph. So please vote so that I can form up teams so that we can have a chance for you each to participate by making your presentations on Zoom of your paragraphs or your stated position. So let's see here. So everybody vote. And so we've got 2 pro, and so let me flip a coin. So we have Yurim is heads and Young Sin is tails, and it is heads. So Yurim, make your pro statement as to why you think, given what you've heard in our debate, that the U.S. Congress will ensure that the U.S. remains an ally with South Korea under a new Trump administration. So go, Yurim.
Okay, I think that the U.S. Congress will ensure that the U.S. remains an ally with South Korea under like whatever administration, Biden or Trump, because I believe that the administration cannot decide solely whether to remain allies with some countries or not, because the executive branch is not the only agent that there is to change the system or institution on its own. Like the Congress is deeply involved in national affairs too.
Well,
So,
okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
like according to the reading materials, the 3 key functions it has, like the lawmaking function or the budgetary function and the oversight function, are intermingled with each other. So the outcome of those functions can affect the various policies, including decisions toward allies, like diplomacy decisions. So this is why I think it seems quite immature that the U.S. tries to remain their relationships with existing allies.
Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. You all read my feedback on your paragraphs, right? And
Yeah.
I made that point. Well, let's hear what. Hey, Ryong, Hae-ryong. So where's Hae-ryong? What's it? Chon Hae-ryong. Chon Hae-ryong. Could you give us your statement as to why you can't decide? Why are you neutral? Why it's so difficult to be pro? Why can't you decide, Hae-ryong? Why are you neutral? Hae-ryong? So we have a chat here. And it says, new message. I don't speak. Hae-ryong doesn't want to speak. Okay, so what about Kayon? Kayon. Make your statement, Kayon, as to why you're neutral. You can't decide. Kayon. 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 Let's see here. Kayon, speak. Speak, Kayon. Turn on your microphone. Where's Kayon? Kayon. I don't see Kayon here. Kayon! Where's Kayon? I don't see Kayon. Well, I don't know what happened. I could say Kayon is saying she can't speak or he can't speak. I don't know why Kayon is saying they can't speak, but they're saying they can't speak. So for unknown reasons. What about okay, well then let's go back to screen share and we go here to see, so we had Yirim, and so she already spoke. So Minha and Yongshin are heads, and it is heads. So Minha is head, and it is tails. So Yongshin, Cho Yongshin, why are you pro? Explain why you're a pro, Yongshin. Yongshin.
Yeah,
Why? Okay, so tell us why you're pro.
because during the past Trump administration, when Trump took a strong stance against U.S. troops stationed in Korea, Republican senators in Congress used the legislative process to block attempts to withdraw U.S. troops from Korea. Also, the majority of Republican lawmakers had different opinions on Trump's foreign policy and Americans' support for the Korea-US alliance was at an all-time high, so Trump faced significant challenges within the party and government. But I think the Congress can act individually from the president. So I thought that we can remain the anomaly with South Korea and the US Congress. But after reading your feedback, I thought that the US Congress and Trump need a compromise. So I think in order to maintain the alliance with South Korea, the US Congress must enact a law that can compromise with President Trump to maintain the alliance with South Korea.
Yeah, I guess, in my comments to you, I mentioned how, you can imagine that even if the U.S. Congress insists that the U.S. defend NATO as part of NATO, or the U.S. Congress insists the U.S. must defend South Korea, that the U.S. president is still the one responsible for ordering the military to act. And the Congress can't order the U.S. military to act. So even if the U.S. Congress demands that the U.S. president defend South Korea, the U.S. president is the one that has to give orders to tell the military to do something. So Trump can be obstructionist. He can make it basically NATO only exist as an idea rather than as a reality, or defend South Korea if he's not willing to order the U.S. military to respond if North Korea does something bad to South Korea, basically it means the alliance is not real, right? But then you're saying that, well, there will be such outrage among American people, among American business community, among American military personnel, among American companies that supply the military, that Trump would pay such a high price for not protecting South Korea that Trump would be in serious political danger. Yeah, I guess possibly. I mean, but again, what is the cost that Trump is going to pay? He's not supposed to be able to be reelected. He's not supposed to. If he wins in November, he can't run for president again, right? Because the U.S. Constitution says a person can only be elected twice U.S. president. So he's not worried about when. Although he might. Some people think he wants to become a dictator. He wants to become like an American Mussolini or an American Park Chung-hee, wants to stay in power forever, right? But let's assume that he's not worried about winning the next election, right? So that was my suggestion that maybe he thinks he's got nothing to lose. So yeah, if the Congress gets upset, the Congress president, he's still going to pull the U.S. out of South Korea, maybe out of Japan, I don't know, maybe out of NATO, because he can do it and nobody else can do it but him. Because he's not a professional politician. So let me see here. Let's flip a coin again. And Angela has chosen to be neutral. Why, Angela, are you neutral? Why can't you decide, Angela?
I write that. Wait. Oh. Firstly, while Congress plays a significant role in shaping foreign policy, the President holds considerable authority in determining the direction of U.S. relations with other countries, and President Trump's unorthodox approach to diplomacy and its prioritization of his administration's agenda over traditional alliance may present challenge for his Congress in maintaining a strong alliance with South Korea. And moreover, despite historical ties and mutual interest between the US and South Korea, the Trump administration's unpredictable foreign policy decision and potential shift in priority could strain the alliance. And yes, so Congress may encounter difficulty in aligning its objectives with those of administration, particularly if they diverge on key issues related to security, trade, or relation stability. So I'm maybe more con, but yes.
Yeah, I think somebody could counter what I was just saying also from the point that you raised, that maybe Trump, he's also concerned first off about his family. Like he wants his children or maybe his daughter to become a future politician, to become like a new dynasty, a new political ruling class dynasty, a de facto dynasty, like the Kennedy name, the Kennedy clan, the Kennedy family is a class of politicians, that he has dreams maybe of his boys, his two boys, or Ivanka Trump, his daughter, becoming a future politician. So if he goes down as a failure, right, it's as a failed president, if he wins election next election, and his presidency is a disaster, he's dooming their political future, right? He's dooming their political dynasty to continue on as a part of the political elite in the United States. He might also be afraid about being prosecuted for crimes if he causes a disaster or starts a disaster for the United States that leads to horrible suffering or cost the United States, that somehow somebody's going to find a way to bring him, like he's at court now. He's got 4 court cases against him, 91 charges against him. There'll be even more court cases against him. I mean, I'm assuming if he's president, he's going to try to have himself, he's going to pardon himself from those from those federal crimes he's been charged with. But if he goes down as a disaster, as a criminal president, they'll find some way to restart those court cases against him. I think that basically, his concern about his family, his family taking over after him and becoming the leaders of the United States, the way the Kennedy family are leaders in the United States for the Democrats. I don't want to underestimate that, right? He wants his name to be remembered as a hero in America. He doesn't want to go down in American history as a disaster, the way Hitler is a disaster for Germany, or Nixon is a disaster for America, or worse, right? So that might be a consideration. Okay, so let's see here for pro, and so Emma is and Picard are heads, and it is tails. So Minha, speak Minha as pro. Why are you pro, Minha? Why do you think that the U.S. Congress will ensure that U.S. will never abandon South Korea, even if Trump gets elected in November? Minha.
Yes, actually, I partly agree with the statement. It is undeniable that South Korea has been a significant ally of the United States in terms of sharing common interests, such as national security and economic benefits. Therefore, for the sake of national interest, South Korea will secure its position as an ally of the United States, no matter who will be the president of the US. Of course, during the first term of the Trump administration, there were several conflicts between Trump and the Congress, especially with the House of Representatives controlled by Democrats. Despite these political conflicts, the Congress is composed of elected members who are expected to represent their people, so at least their priority should be the national interest. In conclusion, the balance of power between Congress and the President has always swung. However, both of them have the responsibility of pursuing national interest. It is certain that both of them treat South Korea as their ally.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my response is that I think that the likely danger is that Trump would be so incoherent and so theatrical and dramatic and chaotic in his political behavior that he would send mixed communication signals to Beijing and Moscow. On the other hand, you can say that was also one of his benefits, that he was seen as a crazy man. So if you're Moscow or Beijing, you don't want to provoke the United States because it's led by a madman, this Donald Trump, who has control over thousands of nuclear weapons. So maybe they'll be more cautious, right? Although, you can say, the governments still make mistakes, even when they think a rational, typical establishment politician is in office. I mean, Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine, which appeared to have been a mistake. He grossly, and his leadership grossly overestimated the extent to which the Russians would just simply be able to topple the Ukrainian regime because they stereotyped as completely degenerate and corrupt. And they could go in and just get rid of that government and put in a new government, and and it was wrong. And that happened when Joe Biden was president, when Joe Biden has been president, not Donald Trump. So can things get worse under a Donald Trump administration, or will Moscow and Beijing and Pyongyang be so nervous that they will be cautious because they don't know what this man will do? So Emma is heads, Picard is tails, and it is tails. So Antoine, why are you pro? Antoine? Antoine?
Yes, I'm here.
So why are you pro, Antoine?
I think I've made a mistake. I'm more con on this.
Then why are you
this video.
con?
Yeah. So I will say I'm a con because the decision to maintain alliance and diplomatic relations with the other country primarily falls under the foreign policy power of the executive branch and the president, not the Congress.
Uh-huh.
And we can see that the Congress Congress, all through the constitutional system of check and balances, allow Congress to use its legislative power to influence or constrain the president's foreign policy, as done to some extent. However, a new administration under President Trump would likely pursue its own foreign policy priorities and approach to alliance which Congress may not be able to fully control.
Okay, and Emma, why are you pro? Emma? 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 Emma's not there. Well, okay. Well, I guess that's it for today. And that's where we'll stop. And so I will see you on Monday. Bye.
Bye.